I met this man. He was about 67 years old, and he stood literally 6 feet 7 inches tall. He was unbelievable. His hair was as white as snow. His eyes were the most bluest that you could ever imagine. But all of his hair was groomed straight up. I mean, he would fit in perfect today. You know what I'm saying? It's just, and it was at least like 5 inches high. It just stood straight up. And I'll never forget the way he was dressed. When he came into my office, I looked at, he was attired with cowboy boots. But they were two different boots. They weren't the same, okay? And each one was different. And he had like one pant leg was tucked in the boot, and the boot was the type that comes way up, and the other was just covering the boot itself. And his pants were so large that he put a rope through the loops, and that's how he held up his pants. And his jacket, he had a plaid jacket. And he was a big man, but this jacket was so small that the sleeves came up like that on him. And he couldn't even button the buttons or any of those things because his arms were so long. And his tie was so wide, so bright, so colorful. It was whiter than Texas, man. I mean, he was wearing that thing. And he proudly sported a large pin that he would put on his coat that was too small for him. And on the label, here's what it said: I am a weather prophet. Now, true story. He would drive up and down right in front of the church and all over the city, of course, you know, in a beat-up old Cadillac. It was a Cadillac convertible, by the way, and it only had one door. The other door was missing. And he would drive up and down, and on the front of the grill of his car, which was that Cadillac, he had two, well, not two, but you know the big Texas Longhorns? They were right on the front of that Cadillac. And on one side of his car, there were glow-in-the-dark words: I am a weather prophet. His name was O.Z. Spurlock. Now listen carefully. No one wanted O.Z. No church would allow him to come in to worship service. They would stop him at the door, and no one wanted him at all. He was mocked all the time. You know what was funny about O.Z.? Every time I saw him, he was smiling. And he was being mocked, and no one wanted him. He was being fun of. He was verbally abused, and more than anything at all, he was totally and completely unloved. One day, he came into my office. This is how I met him. He came into my office, and it was unannounced, unexpected. He just dropped by for a visit. He walked in and gave me a weather prediction. Just walked in. And we have a foyer there at the church, and he came in, and he went, tip, 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 tip. I'm not trying to make fun of the way he talked, but he talked funny. You know, tip, 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 tip. And he looked at me and he says, there is a hurricane over and da-da-da-da-da. And of course, you can imagine what I was thinking, you understand, and so forth. And then he looked at me, and here's what he did. I wrote it down. I just want to make sure I remember. I see it. But he gave me 2 short pencils like this that had been ground down, you know what I mean? And he gave me that and a piece of wadded up paper, and then he just simply walked out of my office, and I'm not sure where he went at that time. Now, that was the beginning of my relationship with O.Z. Potter. Now, but after that, I wasn't very loving to him. I was actually kind of afraid of him because I didn't know, you follow me? I mean, you know. And so, but he would drop by every day and talk, and I was trying to get to know him. He was so hard to get to know, and I never understood the things he was saying because he talked so funny. And so I invited him to church. He never came, but he would always come in and just give me pencils, those used pencils. And so finally one day, I asked him, after about a month or two after meeting him, I said, O.Z., I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but you know you're kind of a strange individual. I mean, look at the car you drive. Look at the way you dress. I mean, you say you're a weather prophet. You're not a weather prophet, you know. And I said, who are you? And he looked at me and he said, listen, I know that I'm strange, but if I could, I don't want to imitate his voice, but he talked so funny and it was so choppy. And he goes, I know you think I'm strange, but see what happened. He said, my mama and my daddy, they were farmers, and I loved them dearly. And they had to work the fields, but when I was a little baby, they would put me in the crib or the little rocker thing by the fireplace, and they would go out and labor and come back and check on me. But one day, I don't know, I just got leaned and I fell out of the rocker and I fell over in front of the fireplace, and it burnt my head to a crisp. It burnt my brain up. And I said, so that's what's wrong with you? He said, yes. And I said, well, Ozzy, do you know Jesus as your Lord? I mean, he loves you. And he looked at me and he says, I love Jesus. He says, Jesus is my Lord. After that night, listen carefully now. After then, one night, I saw him. He pulled his Cadillac right in front of the church that I was pastoring. It was a Sunday night service. And guess who was outside? The youth group was out there. And he parked his car, he got out, and as he walked by the youth group, my youth group, okay, the church that I pastored in, you know what they did? They went into the restroom and they made spit wads. Remember spit wads? And paper towels and soaking wet. And when he came by, about 15 of those kids just smashed him in the face and were throwing it at him over and over. And he was trying to dodge all of them. And instantly, when I watched that, God spoke to my heart. And he said, that's what's happened to Ozzy all of his life. No matter where he goes, he's belittled, he's beat upon. And that's all he's done. People have been hitting him on his life, hitting him all of his life. When that happened, I was so heartbroken by what they did. I mean, did I get on them? You cannot believe. But I never, ever, after that, expected to see Ozzy Spurlock ever again. And so one Sunday night, I'll never forget it, he came to church, and I was so shocked, and he sat he just kind of, snuck in. Didn't want anybody to see him because he didn't do well around people. And he sat on the very back row. And that particular night, I had invited a lady, an Indian from Cherokee or whatever. Her name was Lawana Latour, incredible singer. And she was actually singing when Ozzy Spurlock came in and sat at the very back. And so as this was going on, she started singing about the love of God. And she gets up out off of the stage and starts walking into the audience and walks all the way down. And I'm going, please, Lawana, I don't know what you're doing, but don't go. Please don't say a word to that man or sing to him. Don't do anything. And she walked directly to him and started singing about the power of love and how God loved him and loves him so much. You know what happened about the power of love that night? As I sat there and I was begging God for her to go back there, you know what she did as she sang to him? She reached out as she was singing with the microphone. She grabbed him by the hand and he stood up. He was a giant. She was just a little singer, a little girl, little lady. And she led him as she sang to him about the love of Jesus all the way to the stage. And for the first time, there was a giant of a man facing all those people, and I was over there sitting going, oh God, please. Do you understand what I'm saying? Are y'all with me? And I'm going, dear God, and so forth. And then something happened. You see, there was a move of the Holy Spirit. The manifest presence of God filled that sanctuary. And as Lawana looked at him and started singing to him, You could see him there in that outfit that he wears, and he was so uncomfortable, but I know he liked it. And then all of a sudden something happened. Down on this side were all the youth. And the oldest one, the one who slapped him the hardest in the face with that wet towel and made fun of him, he got up out of his chair. And I was going, oh God, what's going on? He gets out of his chair. He walks up to Hosea. The power of love. He falls on that big man who had never had anyone hold him. And he says, will you forgive me? And I love you. I went, dear God. Then the next one, he gets up, she gets up, the kids. And you've got 15 kids all hugging one man. And LaWanna just keeps on singing. Man, and I'm sitting there and I see all of a sudden as they started repenting and asking for forgiveness and saying how much we love you. You know what happened? You talk about the power of love. Listen, his entire life was changed. The one that nobody wanted, the one that didn't want you to come to his church, that would not even be allowed in church, for the first time in his life, he was made whole. Do you understand? Yes. And you know how? The power of love. Why? Listen, not only was Ozzy changed, the entire youth group was changed. Do you understand? And everybody else was changed. I'm over there crying and weeping and you know, because I wanted to squeeze their throat. You know what I mean? See, the power of love. Whenever love is demonstrated, instead of where, you know, if you don't, not where you, it's your conditional love, that stinks, it's from hell. Amen? Listen, I have been accepted by the one who is love, and so have you. Do you know the power of love when you just demonstrate it, no matter who that it is, without any, your own, whatever it is, scale? Oh, listen. Nothing is more powerful than the love of God. Nothing is more powerful than loving someone who feels unwanted.